Well, hello there, you amazing, beautiful, wonderful people. It's Monday still. Monday, you're still looking amazing. You're looking amazing. And yeah, I wanted to do another video. This is the second video today. If you missed the first one, go and check it out after this. Not right now. Be patient as we went over some of the crime scene photographs that have been released that raise some questions. We touch on some of them when I'm going to go live tomorrow, and we'll have a bit more of a discussion about them together and see what people think. But look, I want to just touch on some things, right? And I know this is going to be, for some people, a hard pill to swallow. But we've been following this case for 2.5 years. It is gradually coming to a conclusion, I feel. Ultimately, Brian Koberger's got, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, whatever, to file an appeal. And as time progresses and each day moves forward, it would seem more unlikely that he's going to, which does make you consider, why wouldn't he appeal? Why would he not appeal? A lot of information has come out. A lot of questions are now being raised. Maybe they're going to leave it right until the last moment and then appeal, because they know that this period of time has allowed for a lot of information to come out. And these questions that we felt were going to be answered have in fact caused more questions. And it does put those who are a bit more open-minded in a spot where they would perhaps, if they're being real, they'll have questions. But look, some people are so close-minded, they could now be told, someone else could come forward and say that they did it, and they'd probably still think Brian Koberger did it. And I know that they'd likely say that we're ignoring the fact that Brian Koberger has said that he did it. I just feel that this was a multiple perpetrator crime. I also feel that whoever did this crime had killed previously, whether that was animals or whether that was other human beings. This crime has got "this isn't my first rodeo" written all fucking over it. And with Brian Koberger, that to me, we'll touch on that. We'll touch on that live, because what I'm trying to get at in this video is, look, there are so many questions that are being raised as we've moved through this. The Idaho 4 case, if you are not asking questions, I have to wonder why you're not asking questions. The crime scene photos that seemingly does not accurately depict what we've been told about the crime. This entire crime, this entire situation seems to absolutely and undeniably just rest on this IGG, the investigative genetic genealogy, and the knife sheath. And the problem that I have with that is that the knife sheath seemingly wasn't seen until later. You've got people around this crime scene, seemingly at some point, they then decide that they can see it from the doorway. Then it's not seen till later. So even the acquisition of this knife sheath raises a question. Was it there all the time? If it was there all the time, why didn't it get seen till later? Can we trust that that situation and that scenario is accurate? And when we know that there is the potential for this to be a crime about someone having the finger pointed at them and saying, this is the person you need to look at, what lengths would law enforcement go when the case in itself offers nothing else? It doesn't really offer anything else concrete, solid. They needed a golden goose. They needed a platter with something with a bow on it, and they got it through the knife sheath. And that, to me, in itself raises a question. It raises a question of the authenticity of the sheath when you remove the sheath and look at every single other thing, all you're left with is questions. Even to the point where you think to yourself, you've got the captain of the police driving around a fucking U-Haul van. That in itself should raise questions. Why is this guy driving a fucking U-Haul around this crime scene? Why do we have a situation where you've got eyewitnesses who claim that there were lights on and people up in the windows, that then raises a question as to, was this house really as dark as what it was? And if it wasn't as dark as what it was, then could the eyewitness, Dylan Mortensen, have seen more than what we've been led to believe that she saw? Which again would then lead you to question, did she Why didn't she recognize Brian Koberger when she was shown a picture of Brian Koberger? But again, we're just questioning things. But you look at the cars. The question of the car. There isn't, and I don't care what anybody says. Could the picture that we've seen, could the video footage depict a white Hyundai Elantra? Yes, it could. But does that rule out that it could be any other car? No, it doesn't. So that entire scenario doesn't genuinely depict Brian Koberger's car beyond a reasonable doubt. And we also have situation in there, which Eddie and some of you also raised, and that was that you've got the DoorDash driver who their behaviour is fucking strange. That looks like they're almost in the road looking for someone, looking to see what's going on out there away from the property. You've got another situation that seems to suggest that someone is signalling the car and running over to the car. So again, and this is just what we're seeing in these footage. And look, it could all be completely coincidental that these things are happening in at the same time, and it makes it look like things are happening that aren't. But the point being, there are things going on that make it look like things are going on that you can't 100% rule out. What else have we got around this situation? We've got the phone situation, which even in the latest documents, even in the latest reports, they're still not saying that Brian Koberger's phone was switched off. They're saying that it appeared to be switched off. It could have been in an area that was at a signal. Or they could absolutely know where it is, because we still have a situation where we've had a specialist with 2 decades worth of experience coming forward and saying that the phone data, there's an issue with it. We know that they dragnetted so many other phones, 3,800 phones, and all of a sudden they're trying to say that certain information doesn't exist, that you can't get it. And we know that that's a lie. So the phone data doesn't make sense. It doesn't rarely make sense. And I'm going to go through an article tomorrow because it talks about the planning and everything that Brian Koberger did. He'd obviously planned this for a long time. The fact that he took his phone, so he went to all this effort to strategically delete and wipe things off his phone. But then on the night of the actual crime, he takes the one thing that would put him there or cause an issue, be problematic. So how can someone who's acutely aware of their phone and the issues that a phone can cause from take the fucking phone? He literally could have left the phone at home. And it doesn't make sense to me why this individual would take their phone, understanding that they're taking a phone that could put them somewhere, and then go on to switch the phone off and then switch the phone back on again. That to me, that situation doesn't make sense. And again, I have to raise questions because of how stupid that seems. You can't have your cake and eat it. You can't say that this individual was so meticulous and they were so good at different things, but then so fucking stupid at perhaps the most stupid thing. And that is taking your phone to the crime and being acutely aware and being to the point where on that journey, at some point, you're going to say, "All right, I've got my phone with me. I better put that in aeroplane mode. And then what I'll do when I've done this crime and I'm on my way back, I'll just switch it back on because no one will notice that." It doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense to me that an individual who seemingly went through so much hassle and was so strategic about deleting stuff that they would take their phone with them. It doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense. So there's so many things around this that do not make sense that I think to myself, how many things that we're being told are being told as part of a story to make you feel a certain way that has, for the most part, worked. It's worked very well. People think that Brian Koberger took his phone, he switched his phone off. He drove his own car and got caught on all of these cameras. You know, it's the issue that we have at the moment is Brian Koberger has pled guilty to this crime. And look, Brian Koberger may have been involved in this crime. For a long time, I have felt that there was more than one person involved in this crime. It doesn't look like the person who did it was their first rodeo to me. This looks like someone who had killed before. Brian Koberger had seemingly asked if anyone else had been arrested. There's some questions around the authenticity of that claim, but we also know that he's pled guilty to a deal that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So we're now in this period, almost like that period between Christmas and New Year, where you're in this void of waiting for something to happen. Will it happen? Will it not happen? And you think to yourself, has someone leveraged Brian Koberg, whether that be law enforcement or whether it be the knowledge that he may have with respect of somebody else being involved in this, and do they pose an external threat to him? So was it best and safest for him to take the fall? Look, still a lot of questions around it, but yeah, the more stuff that keeps coming out, the more questions I get left with. I'm not getting questions answered. And I feel that we should be in a position where the more documents that come out, the more information that we have, especially now that Brian Koberger is locked up, you would think that it would be a case of answering those questions, getting rid of them, so you can tick off and say, right, that makes sense. I understand. And I now know that if this had gone to trial, this is the outcome that we'd have got. And we're not there. And I have to ask, if you are not in the mindset that you are asking questions or understanding that the questions that we felt were going to be answered are actually not being answered, then I have to ask why. Why are you still of a mindset where you're willing to overlook some of the glaringly bizarre and odd things around this case? But what I want you to do in the comments down below is let me know what for you is one of the most odd things about this case that you felt would have potentially or should have been answered as more documentation, more information come out, that in fact, as time has progressed, it has remained glaringly, obviously problematic, and you wonder why. Let me know down below, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Mwah.